you're watching the sheep, right? And like, it's not the most glamorous job in the world. And here you are, finally at a moment's calm, and your brothers are calling you. And it's not just like you have one brother. You have 7, and they're all older than you, and they all love to tell you what to do, and they love to give you the tasks they don't want to do, like sitting all night in the field watching the sheep. But you are the youngest, so you go. And sure enough, you come upon this interesting scene, because standing next to your dad is Samuel, the prophet, and he has come to anoint a new king. And that's weird, because there is a current king right now. But Samuel took a plan from the Lord to bring a heifer to your dad Jesse to meet his sons. And it turns out that Samuel has gone through every single one of the boys, and now he wants to look at you. And you are gross, covered in dirt and filth from the field. You are just a child, and you're like, what the heck is this? And sure enough, you're amazed, because Samuel says to you, it's you. And then he anoints you, and you're not sure what this is, this oil on your head, but the next thing you know, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon you, and you are David. And what you know is that you can do whatever you need to and be whoever you need to be, as long as you are willing to trust in God. And here's how that plays out. Remember, there was that king. That king has an evil spirit troubling him. And it turns out that while Samuel's with your family, there's this conversation going on about, like, how can we calm down the king? And the king thinks about music. And your dad could play some music, and they know that he has a young son who's also good at playing music, because God can take a shepherd and turn him into a rock star, right? So sure enough, David comes up to the palace without the king knowing, Saul's his name, without him knowing who David really is, and he starts singing some psalms, right? And sure enough, because David knows that secret chord and it pleases the Lord, that spirit leaves and departs from the king. So every time the king listens to David's music, he feels better. So he comes to associate that with David, loving David, really treating him as though he's his own son. Cut to a few years later, and this shepherd and musician that God has made goes back to see his family because they're fighting the Philistines. And he goes to visit those brothers of his on the front line. And remember, sometimes they give him a rough time. And they did that this time, because the young son is saying, gosh, why aren't we fighting that giant over there? God is on our side. No battle is bigger than God's, right? So his brothers are like, typical older brothers, right? Well, if you think you can do better, go ahead. Here's a sword. And the son says, the sword's too big. I'm going to take these pebbles. I'm going to take this sling. And God takes that shepherd, he takes that rock star, and he turns him into a warrior who fights many battles and wins many battles, because as long as David was willing, God was going to turn him into whatever he needed. And then ultimately David was willing to be king, so God turned him into a leader for God. And when you become a leader in Christ, when you become a leader in God, it changes who you were. You become anew. And David's reign was constantly under battle, war, but his kingdom, it thrived. And that was because God was at the center. Because when your foot is in heaven, when your eyes are on God and your leadership is founded in the throne room, there is no battle down here that means anything in eternity. So David taught us about being the shepherd, watching those sheep, about being the rock star musician, the musician, about how God can turn us into the warrior, and how ultimately when we lead for God, we lead into victory. So thank you, David, for playing that chord, and thank you for pleasing the Lord. Happy Sunday. Bye.